exist after a ceasefire is signed.
James Waterhouse there reporting in Kyiv. With me in the studio is Doug Klain, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Welcome to you, Doug. Thank you for being with us. So we now know Ukraine and the United States have reached an agreement on that minerals deal. Your reaction, firstly, to that news?
Well, it's a big deal that they are reaching agreement that hopefully the tough words that we've seen between Presidents Trump and President Zelenskyy over the last week or so, that maybe this friction will subside. That, I think, more than anything else, is what Ukraine is getting out of this deal. A friendlier United States that is trying to work more constructively, rather than some of the comments we've seen in the last week that it seems like have been designed to pressure Zelenskyy to get him to this point.
Well, talking about those tactics to get to this point. At one point in a previous iteration of that deal, President Zelenskyy had said that I can't sign this because I can't sell my state. So the fact that they have now both come to the table on this, they've made a deal, what do you think this tells us about where the relationship stands between Kyiv and Washington right now?
I think this was a real test for Zelenskyy. After he knew that Donald Trump was going to be the next president after the election in November, he really went on something of a charm offensive, spending months trying to make it clear to Trump that Ukraine was not the obstacle to peace, that Ukraine would be a willing partner to Trump in trying to get some kind of a deal done, and that Russia was the side that had to be pressured. We saw, of course, Trump had his 90-minute or so phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And since that call, Trump was, seeming to take Russia's side a bit more on many of these cases, voting with Russia at the United Nations, for example, this week, refusing to condemn the invasion of Ukraine. Now, we've seen in the last week that this deal in particular was something that Trump seems to have fixed on as a sign of, I want to make sure that Ukraine is going to be a partner with me and follow the U.S.'s lead. He's emphasized quite a bit how Ukraine is very reliant on the United States for military aid. And it seems like he's been somewhat successful on this.
Well, talking about the other side of the deal, then, what Kyiv will be looking for in terms of security guarantees, potential for boots on the ground in terms of peacekeeping, at least continued weaponry, perhaps even fighting on further. Do you think the Trump administration will come good on that, maintain that?
That's a big question. We don't have the answer yet. Zelenskyy was working very hard to try to get language about security guarantees into this agreement. That's been something that the Ukrainian side has focused very intensely on. When I was in Kyiv about 3 weeks ago, I heard that constantly from Ukrainian government officials. They want to get language on security guarantees as soon as possible, preferably before formal negotiations for peace start with the Russians. So far, we haven't seen as much progress on that, but we did see remarks from Trump today during a press conference, or during remarks at least, talking about potentially new military support for Ukraine. That will be essential. Ukrainian forces will need more ammunition. They'll start running dry sometimes in the coming months. And there's a lot of pressure on that to make sure that U.S. military support is able to continue. Europe is not quite ready to step up and fill that gap yet.
And you were just mentioning there you have been coming back. You were in Ukraine about 3 weeks ago. Just generally the mood on the ground when you've been speaking to Ukrainians, how do they feel about the prospect now of a Donald Trump presidency and what this now means for the war going into its 4th year?
I think the mood in Ukraine is very sober right now. I think that there is something of a realization among many Ukrainians that nobody else is coming to save us. They have to figure out the best path to guarantee their future, their security, and the ability to safely reconstruct their country. They are wizened up to past weak agreements that they have made. The Budapest Memorandum signed in 1994, which was to, for Ukraine to agree to remove its nuclear arms in exchange for security assurances from the United States and also Russia. They've seen that agreements like that are just on paper, that don't have real guarantees in force, they aren't worth all that much, and Ukraine is trying to avoid the mistakes of the past again.
And so there is now the prospect of potential talks between Ukraine, Russia, the United States. If there is a truce to end the war, President Macron has even expressed that could happen in the coming weeks. Do you see Kyiv facing pressure from the United States to cede significant amounts of territory?
It seems like the United States is ready to push Ukraine to make concessions. U.S. officials have talked quite a lot in recent weeks about how Ukraine needs to prepare to make concessions, whether it comes to territory, to NATO membership, to many of these things. I think that Ukraine's bottom line quite clearly is Ukraine has to have security guarantees. They know that if there's a repeat of past weak peace deals with Russia, Putin will take the opportunity to rearm and try to restart this war at the first opportunity. Ukraine can't let that happen. They need a real guarantee that we won't be back here in a few years.
Doug Klain, non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Really good to have your thoughts. Thank you.